I believe we are, I believe we're live. Hi, my name is Dennis Kim, concertmaster of Your Pacific Symphony, and it's great to be with you again after the Thanksgiving break. I have a very special guest this week. As many of you know, we have guest conductors at the Pacific Symphony, like every other orchestra. And before I came here, I had not worked with Rune, but a lot of my colleagues were like, "Oh, do you know Rune? Do you know Rune?" I was like, "No, who is this Rune guy?" I mean, I don't. But it was very strange because usually with the guest conductor, 50% love the guest conductor and 50% really don't like them. But my colleagues, almost every one of them loved Rune, and they were waiting for him to come. And after working with him for the week, I realized why. But we're here with Rune Bergmann, straight from Poland.
For now, follow for now, but hopefully Norway in some hours.
Exactly. No, it's been an amazing situation because he had a concert earlier and now he's doing this mixer with us. And then he's driving all the way to his home in Norway. So thank you so much for being with us and welcome to Southern California.
Thank you so much. You have much better weather than we have in Norway and in Poland at the moment. So I couldn't resist.
Right. No, it's great seeing you again. I mean, I know that the last time I saw you was in your festival in Norway. After working with you here, we got a chance to talk, and you invited me to this incredible, magical little festival. Tell me a little bit from where are you from, and what you do at this festival specifically.
Yeah. Um, I mean, the last time we met, actually, I don't think any of us thought it would be such a long time until the next time we were meeting. So it was a very strange thing and a very strange year that we had to also do the festival this year, but of course, very small and a lot of things more digital than live concerts. But I don't know if our people, the audience can see us, but the mountains behind me is basically where I was born. And this is close to the Geiranger Fjord in Norway. So it's the mountains that go straight down to the fjord. And I grew up in a very little village, only 8,000 people living there, called Sykkelben. Um, the only thing Sykkelben is famous for is making furnitures. So before IKEA, I would say it was the number one place everybody bought their furnitures. But they still make very high-end furniture. So basically, all the people that works there makes furnitures. Me and my brother was a little bit different, and I think in many eyes a little bit strange because we wanted to do music, and that wasn't so natural because classical music wasn't the thing. There were folk musicians, some jazz musicians, but it was very hard actually to get a teacher. And why we were so pushy to do music, I'm not sure. But basically, my brother is a pianist, organist, and choir conductor mostly. And he's 8 years older than me, and I just was following him in his footsteps. And but I think from around 8 years old, I saw Carlos Kleiber doing the New Year's concert from Vienna on TV, and I turned to my parents and said, "This is what I'm going to do with my life." And strangely enough, they took it seriously and they started investigating how can we do this. And the only way to give me an education and to teach me what I needed to know was for me to fly every second week to Oslo, the capital in Norway. And at that time, it wasn't so easy. It was extremely expensive, and it wasn't easy for a 12-year-old to travel alone. But I had an uncle in Oslo, and I stayed there. And at that time, they made a system, so they were teaching me history, theory, all the things I needed to know. And I got the opportunity to follow the Oslo Philharmonic rehearsals.
Wow.
And I have to say that that was my best education because at the time, Marius Janssons was the chief conductor. Manfred Honeck was the principal guest conductor,
My
and
goodness.
Herbert Blomstedt was the honorary conductor. So, and of course, as you said, musicians react differently to also the guest conductors, right? So I saw many weeks that I would say was a total disaster. But you learn a lot from that as well, because I could see and analyze, wow, what did they do that really pissed off the musicians, that did not work? And then I could experience the conductors like Janssons and, I mean, Blomstedt. It was just an amazing experience to see how respectful he was at all the musicians and how he worked with them. And I got to meet all these conductors, and they gave me good advice. So even that was not a formal education. It's probably the time I learned the most.
That's amazing. I mean, because I've been to, I mean, not maybe your hometown, but close to your hometown, and there's not much there. And to start music in that kind of environment would seem, like you said, almost impossible. But what instrument did you play? What is your instrument of choice?
So when I started up, so my father was an amateur trumpet player. He played in the local band. So that was the first instrument I picked up. Then about the same time, I started playing piano. And that was important. It was an advice I got that if you're going to be a conductor, you need to know how to play the scores and really understand the harmonies. And piano is the best way to go. And then later I tried to pick up violin and viola a little bit, but if you watch my hands here, I should have played the double bass. So that wasn't, I never became a violin virtuoso, but I know the basics of it. And I think that when I started studying at the Sibelius Academy, we basically had to play every instrument, not like on a high level, but you need to know how a French horn works, and you need to know how a flute works, not to tell them how to play, but because I mean, the professional musicians have an education, they play extremely well, but I have to know, first of all, how to approach them and what I can expect of them, and also how to help them actually play their best. Because with my hands, you can, as a conductor, you can do small gestures that makes such a difference. And I mean, in an orchestra, you have percussions, sometimes you have even pianists playing, and they are used to be very on time. Then you have the brass and the winds that needs to breathe. Then you have the strings that needs time to prepare. And also sometimes it takes a little bit time before actually the note comes, while the brass player goes bam, and it's there. And of course, everybody sits very differently, and it's spread out on a huge space on the stage. So all these things needs to be in the hands somehow and give different impulses. And when I do opera, it's even more complicated because you have singers, then some of them are on time, then some of them are too early, and most of them are too late. So it's always something you have to feel and know how to handle. And the only way is to try it. So I even had lessons in singing opera, but I will not do that publicly.
So there were some rumors, especially at your festival, and I wanted to confirm with you. Someone said that I don't know if you're a professional or semi-professional, but you're an athlete of some sort also.
Yeah, that's a rumor. No, I mean, I was doing shot put. So I was kind of the Norwegian youth champion of shot put.
So it's not a rumor, and no, that's what they said. I mean, you were at a very high level. It wasn't that you did it for fun, but you were at a competitive level. So what is that like, being a shot putter? My gosh.
Oh, it's very interesting because, you know, I kind of have the Viking body for it. So I trained a lot. So I was very strong. And of course, if you see shot put, it feels like it's only muscles, right? But actually, it's a lot similar with music, that if you can combine the way you use your body, both technically and physically, like it's because I could not compete on a high level if I was not fast and kind of light in my movements. At the same time, I needed a strong arm. So sometimes when people see me conducting, I mean, people call me the huge sweaty Viking, usually when I'm on stage. But it was a singer who said, "You're surprisingly light on your feet to be
Oh,
that big," right?
absolutely.
So,
Right.
and this comes from the shot put days, because I needed to be fast with my legs and then strong with my arm. So, but this also came from my father. He was an athlete, and he was teaching me this. And I think I was around 16 years old. Then my father had a talk with me and said, it comes to a point where you have to spend more time on one or the other. And I really wanted to do music, of course, but it was tempting to. But at the time, I mean, if we go back this many years, I don't even want to think how many years, but I mean, it wasn't the same system for testing for drugs in sports those days. And if I saw some of my, I was competing with from East Germany and Russians. I mean, I'm big, but they were 3 times bigger.
Right.
And as my father said, this is no way to go. It's not healthy. I don't want you to do anything you regret. And your career as an athlete will be very short and can be very damaging. Music, you can enjoy on any level the rest of your life. And I'm so glad for that advice, because I have it with me still, those days as an athlete, but music, I could not live without it. And now I see how much it means for people. And especially now, I mean, when things are tough, we need the music to keep the hope up.
No, absolutely. So those of you who have seen Rune conduct, you're one of the few people, maybe you're the only one, who actually doesn't use a podium when you conduct. I've met a lot of tall conductors, but they've always had some kind of podium, but you are actually on the same level with the other musicians. So that was something very interesting. And please, by the way, anyone who's joining us, please, you can ask questions in the chat box or the Q&A, and I'll try to get to them. But yeah, I mean, that's something I also noticed. You were not only on the floor with us, but you were so light on your feet. And looking at you, you should not be light on your feet. I mean, you're a giant man, and I mean, every part of you is big. But when we were doing the Nielsen, I mean, you were so light. So yeah, I mean, it's something to see you in action. And I got to see it, of course, in your festival also. Not only conducting, but just taking care of everything and very quick on your feet.
Thank you. I just want to mention as well, I mean, you're talking about the podium. There are 2 reasons for it. First of all, the last time I did use a podium, I watched the video. I was making a video just see how it looks and how I could improve my technique. And I was watching this together with my agent. It was like, wow, it looks like King Kong is flying over the orchestra. I mean, I was huge. So it kind of didn't feel natural. It didn't look natural. So I tried to be without a podium. Then I actually realized that being closer to the musicians and also be on the floor, just feeling all the vibrations, everything that is going on, gave me a totally different musical experience.
Right.
So instead of showing the music and beating the music, I was part of the music. And I, in many ways, at that moment, I changed my approach for everything. And my approach now is chamber music all the way. Of course, I'm a conductor. I have to lead the performance. I have to lead the musicians, and the musicians will trust me to lead them. But at the same time, I want to give them as much space as possible, because if we look at a symphony orchestra, I mean, the level we have in front of us as conductors is amazing, and also to, instead of telling them what to do, I always want to feel the musicians giving something. I want to see their soul a little bit, and then we can together find the way. Right. And I love that experience, and it's different from every country, from every orchestra.
No, absolutely. And as many of you know, I mean, you are music director in few orchestras, and you guest conduct everywhere. How is that different? You know, when you are in front of your own orchestra with your musicians that you know, and then some place that you go and you're there just a week. I know that some of the places you go regularly, but still you're a guest conductor. So what is the difference between being music director and guest conductor?
Uh, Politics. I mean, it's a little bit. The biggest difference is that I have to be involved in much more things, in good and bad ways. Of course, I have to make sure that the season is planned. We have soloists and we have guest conductors. So there's a lot of, and I think many orchestras doesn't realize that. But as a music director, the job you do on the podium, that's kind of 10 to 20% only. That's when you're seen. What's happened behind the scenes are really the big job and to make a success and to plan it. So that takes a lot of time. And especially now when we don't play much because of the pandemic, it's actually a bigger challenge because I have to be there for the musicians, not in a musical way, but in a human way and as a leader and giving them hope and make sure that everybody is sane and alive. So it has been quite a lot of work, I would say now. But when you come to as a guest conductor, you don't have to worry about those things. You are only worrying about the piece you're going to do that week and try to make that a best possible performance. So it's kind of it's like having ice cream before dinner when you go guest conducting. But again, if you fail and the musicians don't like you, it's going to be a hard and long week. So you have to, I would say, the knowledge and experience I build, knowing the orchestras where I'm a music director in good and bad ways, also prepares me for the future and what is going to happen. And I always say to young conductors, and that comes in and will have a lesson with me or something, I said, you have to build your toolbox. It's like if you're electrician or something, you know, you have your box with different tools that if this happens, you can do that. If that happens, you can do that. So the more tools and the more experience and the more you have seen, the easier it is to react to different situations. And there will always be something, but that's part of the fun though. So the conducting itself is about the same, but the experience and the responsibility, of course, is very, very different.
No, it's I mean, I had a chance to work in Europe and in Asia and now in America, and a music director's job is totally different in all those places. And the biggest difference, of course, here in America is you have to raise money. But in Calgary, I'm sure it's the same. But in Europe, what is the main job of the music director? Because you don't have to raise money.
Yeah, I mean, it's where I'm right now in Poland. It's government funded, so but still, it's changing a little bit. So even though the musicians have their salary, if you want to do big projects, if you want to bring in a big star soloist, something like this, then we have to go out to sponsors, you know, and stuff like this. And for me, that has been quite natural because I have that experience from North America. So that hasn't been a big challenge. I would say here, it's more that you, instead of talking to donors, you are talking to politicians in more. Because it always comes, the question, is this important? Is this, should we have these priorities instead of that? So I always thought that there would be such a big difference between these countries, but in the same way, it's the same job, but just in a different direction. And working with politicians is not always the easiest because they have their priorities. People are watching, and they have to look good. So always to have to protect that what we do is important, that music and culture is important, that can sometimes be challenging. And that's part of why I started this festival, that I wanted to just make something that came from my heart. Like, this is what we want to do. This is what we want to play, and try to make it easy. But again, you always need to take some, you have to, even there are politicians, even there are audience, and you have to make sure that everybody is comfortable with what you do. But I can do more fun things though in the festival.
I mean, that'll cue us up for the small clip that you've sent. This is from your festival for 2 years ago, where I had a chance to participate. But it's a little bit of this and that, but you'll get to see the nature. You'll get to see some music, of course, but it's an amazing clip. I hope Alexi can play it now. And
yeah.
And no, please, I mean, if you need to speak over some of the video, please feel free. And like I said, audience,
yeah,
please send questions if you have in the Q&A or the chat, please.
Before we start, oh yeah, here we go. Okay. So this is the Garangerfjord by boat. Now we're on the top of the mountains, where there is a little glass building where we could have a concert, and you will soon see them play. Now I play the ramp horn, Norwegian folk.
Rose a little bit.
Here we see the fjords and the Geiranger.
No, it brought back so many memories. Thank you so much for sharing that clip. My gosh. I think that's probably the first time a Strat has ever been played at that height.
Yes, for sure. And it wasn't easy to hear the string quartet on the boat under the waterfall, but it was a wonderful day when we were driving from Ålesund, the city, and into the Geiranger Fjord. And I saw someone commented on the T-shirts, just for everyone that looked at them. Every year we have like an artist, a painter that also is part of the festival in an art exhibition. And the artists, we always ask them if they can make kind of the theme of the T-shirt for that year. So every year is unique with some artwork on it. So, but just to comment a little bit, because when I played the ram's horn, that is it's a horn, so it's impossible almost to play it. So you have to use both fingers and hands and lips to bend up and down to get it to sound. But it's a typical Norwegian folk instrument. And this was what I played was a melody, it was half of it, the Andines lullaby. And the story about this actually was that Greg brought a friend and they walked up to the mountain, and these I'm not sure what it was called those days, but there were like young girls taking care of the cows, milking them and making sure that in Norwegian we call it budeie. So they took care of the sheep and the cows. And when he came up, this beautiful girl Jendine was sitting there and humming this lullaby. And he was so inspired that he actually took a piece of paper, and on the back of the cow, he put the paper there and he wrote down what she was singing. And this became one of the most famous kind of melodies that Grieg picked up in the countryside of Norway. And then a funny story is that when we did the Holberg suite, of course, we have to do that in the mountains. And when musicians were dark, it was just to show everyone the view, the spectacular view. And of course, this is what inspired Grieg in so much of his music, the mountains. But a funny story there about Dennis is that Dennis, of course, has played this piece 1,000 times, like most string players has. And I said, I will not conduct it. So, and Dennis said, yeah, no, we don't need a conductor for this. And of course, mostly it's played without a conductor. But the guy that was conducting there, he is a principal bassoon player of the Oslo Philharmonic, and he's going more and more into conducting. So I said to Dennis, let him at least pretend that he's leading this. And this is sometimes how it also is with conductors, that because when you have such musicians in front of you, you're not needed as a conductor. The conductor needs the musicians, because he, as a kind of a young developing conductor, doesn't have those experiences with actually what those small details, what can happen when he does this and that, and also how to feel the flow of a very good orchestra. So I always I wanted to let him have that opportunity to stand in front of something that sounds so great, and also with an amazing concertmaster in Dennis, as you all know. So that was a very nice experience, and I wish you could all be there. So
Yeah.
if you want to come, we bring Dennis back and we do that all over again.
No, I mean, he's amazing. He's an incredible bassoonist, of course, the most expressive bassoonist I know. But he's just starting his conducting career. I've actually seen him on Facebook now conducting Scheherazade and stuff. But no, it was a great experience because I got to meet some of your musicians from Poland, and you had musicians from a lot of the orchestras that you've guest conducted. So it was a great little mixture of very talented musicians who were, of course, flexible because there was lots of reasons to be flexible, of course. The special phrase I believe was it was misterioso. Everything was misterioso. The next rehearsal, the next concert, when we eat, what we eat, it's misterioso. So it was a fun week. Incredible food, incredible music. Rune and I have a lot of connections. We start, of course, with our love of music and food. But you had a chance to go to school in Finland, where I worked for 6.5 years. Tell us why Finland creates so many great conductors, not only Finnish conductors, but they train so many conductors that are successful today. What is the secret of the Sibelius Academy and Finnish education?
Oh wow, that was a big question, but I'll try to do the short version. I would say that what strikes me I mean, Finland is probably, like in school systems as well, on the highest possible level in the world. And I think it starts with something that is many times in many places lacking more and more: respect for other people. And basically, when you go to school, you don't have as many disciplinary problems because you respect the teacher. There is a huge respect for the profession of a teacher, and both from the kids and the parents. So I think that's where kind of it starts. Then culture for them, Finland is a country that is used to struggle. They have been used to fight for what they believe in and for their freedom, and this is why they're very patriotic in a way. They believe and they want to support their own. That's also lacking in many countries, that something is always better somewhere else. The grass is always greener on the other side and stuff like this. In Finland, if we don't have the best people, we have to make them. So I think that's also something. And then when it comes to education itself, for me, it was shocking because I've studied also conducting Norway, Sweden, and different places. But to come there and see how much money they put into it, because going a little bit back to the conductor that conducted the Holberg suite, not because the musicians needed him, because he needed them. It is the time it takes for a musician. I mean, as you said, he's probably one of the best bassoon players in the world. He plays so expressive, and he can make magic with his body language and his bassoon. But when you give him a stick and in front of an orchestra, he gets stiff and he doesn't know how to move anymore. So my first time I met him, I said, "Can you pretend you're not conducting? You pretend that you're playing the bassoon, and everybody will understand what you mean." So this is a process, and for every conductor, this is a process. Some can do it quickly, and some spends the whole life becoming natural. This is where Finland is different, because most educations you get to conduct 1 or 2 pianists, and I've done that as well. So you can practice the Beethoven symphonies by 2 pianists playing the parts. But the challenge is that pianists are so quick and so accurate in timing. So you kind of almost get the sound before you beat. Then you come in front of an orchestra of 100 musicians and you don't know what to do because they're far behind. So that's, I see many conductors coming from educations where they conducted pianos and the response was like immediately. Then they come in front of string players and they have no idea how to deal with it. And the worst thing you can do as a conductor is then start slowing down and wait for them, because then everything gets slower. So with many orchestras I conduct, they are so far behind, but I have to keep the music in my head and keep going and trust. And this is where also the trust between the concertmaster and the conductor is extremely important, because a conductor can be in front or do different things, but always trust that the orchestra is together with the concertmaster. So it's kind of it's a very important cooperation. And in Finland, basically you had a full symphony orchestra 2 days a week.
Amazing.
And it was a little bit surprising because I came there, I was used to educations that started like, you had Monday mornings, Tuesday mornings, Wednesday mornings, and then you had theory and history and all these kind of things. The first thing that happened when I came for the audition, and I mean, I think there was 400 applications a year and one spot. So it was, of course, competitive. But the thing what surprised me was that I said, so am I not going to have theory and these things and instrument and they said, no. I said, oh, I thought that was normal in any education. Yeah, but you know it already. You've done it. You know how to play. Why should we teach you to play? We're going to teach you to conduct. So basically they build the education from the level you have. So meaning that another conductor came there, maybe was weak in air training or in piano. So they would have to give more lessons for that. I done all that. So when I came, they said, okay, the only thing we want to work with you on is the repertoire, the working with the orchestra, and your technique. So I was conducting. So and what was surprisingly that the lessons were Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. And the Fridays we came and we met and we worked with the assistant professor, then with 2 pianos and whatever instrument we could play. So sometimes they gave me a French horn and said, play. And so that was a funny experience. But we got to do the repertoire starting. And then on Saturday, we had a full hour. Usually 1 hour I was in front of a professional orchestra and 1 hour on Sunday. And the repertoire we could choose because some conductors needed to practice their Beethoven, some conductors needed to do Mahler, and some conductors just couldn't do Debussy, right? So we were all in different levels and different needs, and we could build our own education. And the surprising thing was that in this orchestra, the training orchestra, they took the best students and they made auditions. So it was actually, many wanted to play there. They didn't get much money for it, but it was a symbolic thing. And it was very, like, for instance, the girl that played on the string quartet on the boat there under the waterfall, that's Kati. She now plays in the Helsinki Philharmonic, and she was the concertmaster of that training orchestra. And you can imagine not only the training I got, but the training she got to play all that repertoire. So every week they got to drive through a lot of repertoire. And I think also that's different with Finnish musicians if we compare to the rest of the world, where everybody plays the Mendelssohn violin concerto and the Sibelius violin concerto all their life. In Finland, they actually play more orchestral repertoire, so they are more prepared for what they're going to do. So having this full hour working with real people, and half of the orchestra were people from Helsinki Philharmonic and from the opera. There were many professional musicians that really wanted to be part of the next generation conductors. So they were sitting there and giving feedback. And the whole thing was an amazing experience. And also the fact that the professors never interrupted when I was, unless you were really sinking, but then it needed to be an emergency. And I was also always surprised because when I had master classes before, many conductors interrupt all the time. And it ends up that it's more about the teacher than the student.
Right.
And this, so for me, it was a big surprise. And then I asked my professor, so why did you let me do those mistakes? And then he said, because now you know, and you will never do them again. So it was something that you have to learn something. Sometimes you have to sink. But then we took video of everything. And of course, I got to know all my mistakes, very tough after the session. But And he also said, if I interrupt you, I'm the maestro. The musicians will look up to me and they will just play whatever you do. He said, if you're going to become a conductor, you need to actually know how to get that respect and how to find that feeling and how that flow between the musicians and you as a conductor. And then I cannot interrupt. I have to be sitting far back. So this is a big question. I mean, Finland is an extraordinary country, as you know, in many ways. I mean, most of the education there you got in some way that I don't think exists in the rest of the world. They built up my education from what I needed and not from what they had to offer. And of course, the most knowledge you learned after the lessons when you went to sauna.
So, of course, there's a teacher that you study with, and I had a chance to work with in Finland. His name is Leif Segerström. And can you share a story, the most G-rated story that you could possibly think of that our audience would enjoy? Be careful, please.
Wow. Okay, now I have to be selective here. Now, I mean, there's so many funny stories with him. But
just to give you a little background, this gentleman is maybe 5 foot. He looks like Santa Claus, 5 foot and maybe 400 pounds. Someone told me during Corona he lost 100 pounds, but I haven't seen that. But so he looks like Santa Claus, and he's super genius. But there's so many stories of this gentleman. And why don't you share one that the audience will enjoy?
So yeah, I mean, so I was so lucky that I had, because he was for many years. It was Jorma Panola, the legendary conductor and teacher. And I was so lucky that in the beginning, it was Jorma Panola, and then he retired and Segerström came. And I would say the difference between those two, it's like day and night, because Jorma Panola is that he never was teaching technique. That's why if you look at Finnish conductors, they don't even look the same. Like it's not even the same technique. Some of them actually looks like they have a poor technique, but they are still amazing performers. And that becomes because Jorma Panola said, if it works, you're doing the right thing. If it doesn't work, you have to do something else. That was his kind of. Then Segerström came, and he came from Juilliard School. He had been studying there. And so he was very focused on a clean technique. And especially because he's an amazing opera conductor. I mean, playing Wagner with him and Strauss, all these things is amazing. So I didn't understand in the beginning how this was important. So a funny story, maybe I tell a couple of stories, but one of the first things that happened was that I came from a background where I was used to working with the orchestra. I didn't have problems talking to them and know what to ask for. Many young conductors would, so they need to have that experience. I came then kind of with a homemade technique at the time, and he showed me how I should do it. And I was so angry at him because it felt so unnatural. I couldn't express myself as I was used to. But for 1 year, he made me stand there, and I was not allowed to speak. I could only say where we start, like numbers and letters. Because he said, I know you can rehearse an orchestra. Now I want to see that you can do the same without saying a word. That was really a game changer for me, because it is actually possible to make an amazing week with an orchestra and an amazing performance without saying anything, because in our body language, everything is there. So I had to stand there, and then I had like when I was conducting, my legs were going up and down. So he asked me, do you need to go to the toilet? Do you need to go use the bathroom? I said, no. So why are you looking like you really have to pee? I said, I don't know, I just want to express. He says, but express yourself in your face and in your arms, not in your legs and knees. So he went and he took some wood and some tape. So I was actually stuck, my legs were stuck in the floor at the same spot. And then I still was doing it, right? So he went and he found another wooden piece that he stuck down my neck and down my pants. So I could not bend my neck or my back or anything. So I was like standing there totally stiff. And he made me do this for weeks. So if some of you remember the Karate Kid movies, it was in the 80s or 90s or something, it was where he had to do, he was painting and doing all this kind of stuff to build his technique. That was the same thing I had to go through. But I have to tell a very strange and funny story at the same time. So Sigurdstam, he was quite early into, so his eyes wasn't as they used to be. So he started with what is it, contacts you call it, or lenses or contacts?
Yeah, contact, yeah.
Yeah. So and this doctor gave him this, and we were in Stockholm, and he was doing some Wagner opera, and I was there as his assistant, and he then suddenly were in panic because he couldn't see. He was blind. And then when we brought him to the hospital, they were taking out 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not sure if it was 12 or something that was in there, because he's a genius. I mean, he knows everything, but he didn't catch that point that you put them in and then you take them out before you take the next one in. So he was actually blind, and but it all worked out. But I could tell you thousands of stories. I think I have to write a book about being the assistant of Leif Söderström.
No, if any of you get a chance to go to one of Rune's festivals where you can have interaction with him and have a beer or have a meal with him, there's some of these stories that we can't share over Zoom and with an audience of many people. But I mean, there are some ridiculous stories, and of course, every Finn has stories. And even for me as a foreigner living in Finland, I heard so many stories. This is a gentleman that would go to a restaurant and order everything on the menu and absolutely finish it. So I was trying to organize my G-rated stories of Segerström. One time he was guest conducting our orchestra, and he pulled me aside and said, "Can I see you after the rehearsal?" And I was a little bit worried. I said, "Okay." And he said, by the way, he's a prolific composer. He's written over 300 symphonies. But he's written many, many violin concertos. And he said, "I would like you to play my violin concerto." I was like, "Fine." He's like, "Do you know them?" I said, No, I don't." He's like, "Please sit down and listen." And so he gave me headphones, and then he gave me the score. And I was listening, and yeah, I mean, I thought he was wondering, what I thought. And about 2 minutes in, he said, where is it right here? And I was like, I wasn't really paying attention to the score, of course. I was just trying to listen, getting the kind of general thoughts on the concerto. And for 10, 20 minutes, he made me follow through the score of this concerto that was very atonal and all over the map. And then he did that almost every day that week. He said, "Come and listen to my next concerto." And it was an amazing guy. And my girls at that time were very young. And I took a picture with him to prove that Santa Claus was real, because he really looks like a real life Santa Claus. I just saw in the news that he just took a new position in St. Petersburg as a music director. Incredible at his age. So I wish him great luck, of course. I have a question here. What exactly does it mean that a conductor has a particular sound? How do conductors achieve their personal signature sound with different orchestras? Can they? And or is it only with their own orchestra?
Good question.
It is a great question. Yeah, absolutely.
It brings us back to actually what we were talking about all day, the technique. Because I would say maybe in the old days, there were signature sounds in orchestras with a specific conductor. It was a little bit different then. The conductors stayed more in one town and did more work with just one orchestra. Now, I would say I can almost achieve the same sound with any orchestra I work with. Like not 100%, but at least up to 80. And that has more what I want to hear. And when I'm in front of the orchestra, as I told earlier, standing on the floor, feeling what the orchestra can do, some orchestras need me to be harder, and because they have maybe a little bit slushy sound, so I need to tighten it up. While actually many orchestras has a little bit a hard and accurate sound, and that's where the Segerstorm arms comes in. That you can basically, just by moving your elbow up 1 centimeter, just a little bit or down, can change the whole sound of the ensemble. And most musicians in orchestras, I don't think even know this. They can just feel it. They don't know how it happens. And I think this is what really separates many conductors, that how much music you have in your arms. And I've also seen colleagues that I've been talking to that sometimes are asking me, because I come from a background where, like, I conducted a lot of choir music, worked with a lot of choirs. So you need to breathe in a totally different way. While many conductors that only plays the piano, they kind of conduct the orchestra like they would play the piano. Right. And that can work as well, but it's a different sound. So it always depends how you want it to, how it should, you want to hear it. And that comes back to the toolbox, that one orchestra needs a screwdriver and another needs a hammer, you know. Right. So I think conductors can adjust that quite nicely and get quite close to it.
Well, since this is a Pacific Symphony production, what is one of the reasons that you love the Pacific Symphony and like to come back here, other than In-N-Out Burger, other than the great Asian food, other than all those things? Musically speaking, what brings you back? Because I'm sure your schedule is very tight. So many people are asking, but why do you always come and agree to work with the musicians of the Pacific Symphony?
Burgers are always high on the list, of course, but I mean, you have the most wonderful beach, and in Norway now it's snowing, so that's one thing. But no, I have to say that it's a unique orchestra in many ways, both the scheduling and the concerts you play, how much you do. It's something about that orchestra that just made me feel at home. So, and this is something you can feel very differently. And also, it's an orchestra with a soul. I felt immediately when I was there is a soul in the orchestra, and the musicians want to play well. And then that's more important than actually perfection. That sometimes you can reach perfection or not, but if there is no soul in it, it doesn't, for me, doesn't give much. And I would have to say that the Pacific Symphony has a very special soul, and the musicians there are, first of all, on a very high level, but also very loving people. And that's important for me. The combination between the music making and the humans behind the instruments. And yeah, I always felt welcome and very, very nice time.
No, it is. I mean, a lot of people ask me the same question. You know, the relationship between the conductor, especially guest conductor, and an orchestra. Because without saying any names, when I worked in Hong Kong, and then I had many colleagues in Singapore, a guest conductor, a foreign conductor, would come to Singapore, and he would be God. I mean, very successful week, incredible concerts, and then he would come 3 hours to the east, and it was total chemistry. And when you find that right chemistry, it is something special. And as hopefully many of you who've watched Rune with the Pacific Symphony, I think there's a special connection. And I think that it's a mutual respect between musicians and the conductor, and vice versa, because we see your great joy of life and of just what you're doing, and that rubs off on musicians. I personally enjoy that week immensely, and then working with you and spending some time with you in your festival. Some people ask what your festival is. It's the Fjord Cadenza, I believe.
Fjord Cadenza, yes. And it's located, the closest city is Ålesund, and it's basically located in the Geiranger Fjords.
So when you invited me, I basically booked a ticket to Oslo, and I said, well, it'll probably be close. that was not the case. It was another long flight and in a small plane, landing in a very small airport, but it was a magical week. Thank you very much for that. I know that a lot of conductors, they kind of cross and they never actually meet. Have you ever worked with Maestro Sinclair or met him even?
Yes, I have. At least 2 times, I think, when I've been with the Pacific Symphony. So that's always a pleasure. But it's been like maybe he came in one day before he went to another place, right? So because I was there because he was traveling. So,
Right.
but we had some short chats, and it's always a pleasure.
No, I mean, a bunch of my friends who are conductors, they actually don't know other conductors because they just kind of cross in the air. And you're here because he's somewhere else. So it's very rarely that he would be here and not working with your orchestra. And I'm sure that's the same with your orchestras in Calgary and in Poland and in Austria.
You meet them at the airport. Yeah,
exactly. You meet at the airport. First of all, thank you so much for taking time. I know it's very early in the morning or very late at night there in Poland. I hope you have a very safe drive. Don't get home too quickly. And whenever this is over, I hope that you will have time to come back and work with us again. And please, I think that everyone watching today can see the joy that you have, not only talking about music, but even about sports and about everything. I think that's needed in this day. And it's great to see, even in these difficult times, that your joy and love of life is so abundant. Thank you so much, Rune. And it's great to see you here in Zoom, but hopefully we'll get to see you in person very soon.
Hopefully. And I greetings to all the musicians and all the audience. And I miss all of you, and I hope you're safe and healthy and that we can meet very soon.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.